Atarka was more than a name, she was a force, an ancient predator, born from the primal chaos of Ugin's dragon tempests. Her arrival on Tarkir was like the storm itself, a violent, untamable cataclysm. Her massive form towered above the mountains, a blend of raw muscle and terrifying beauty, her fur thick, wild, and untamed, her horns twisting like jagged blades slicing through the very air. Her eyes glinted with an insatiable hunger that could only be sated by destruction. Her flames, green and fierce, were not of this world, a wild manifestation of untamed power that echoed the madness of the tempests she was born from. And she was not alone. Atarka's brood, her offspring, had emerged alongside her, twisted, hungry, barely sapient creatures driven by the same unrelenting thirst for blood and chaos. Together, they roamed the jagged slopes of Tarkir, hunting everything in their path, their senses attuned to every pulse of life. Nothing was safe. Nothing could hide. The Temur, the hardy, weathered people of Tarkir's frigid frontier, revered Atarka for the savagery she represented. She was the embodiment of nature's rawest impulses, untethered by civilization, ruled only by instinct and hunger. To the Temur, she was a symbol of the frontier's brutal reality, a reminder that survival was a constant battle, and the rules of the civilized world didn't apply in the cold, harsh wilderness. The dragons were the ultimate predators, and Atarka, the queen of them all, was worshipped and feared. But that was before the Khanfal, before Ugin's death. The timeline was different then, everything was different. In the original timeline, the dragons, including Atarka, were driven to extinction. The clash with the Tarkir clans was inevitable, but it was a battle they lost. The clans fought back against the Dragon Lords with all the fury of a world that had learned to survive by its own rules. The dragons fell, one by one, and with them Atarka's brood perished, their flames extinguished, their hunger unquenched, and Atarka herself never reached the status of elder. But there was a fracture in time, a rip in the fabric of Tarkir's existence, a tear opened by Sarkhan Vol, a man with the weight of 1,000 years on his shoulders, a man who had witnessed time unravel and reweave itself in strange, unpredictable patterns. The timeline was no longer the same, and in this new world, Atarka lived on. She had survived, but not in the way you'd expect. She wasn't just a force of destruction anymore. She was something more, something with a purpose, something that for a moment had hope. In this altered timeline, something had shifted. The Atarka brood was still there, but there was a subtle change in the way they interacted with the world. They were still driven by hunger, wild, untamable hunger. But now they had a connection to the Temur, to Yasova, their leader. Yasova, resourceful and cunning, had found a way to keep the dragons at bay. She had learned the art of feeding them, of using mammoth carcasses to sate their insatiable appetites, distracting them long enough to keep her clan safe. Atarka's savage intelligence, barely sapient but enough to understand her needs, had allowed this arrangement to continue. And yet fear lingered. The Temur knew that the dragons, while fed, were still wild, still hungry, still dangerous. The elemental shamans of the Temur had learned to channel the primal forces of nature, and they feared what would happen if the dragons ever turned on them. The Atarka dragons, who had once been revered as symbols of raw power, now became a threat. The clan, led by Surak, the Hunt Caller, was forced into a precarious existence, balancing their survival with their devotion to the dragons. They worshipped Atarka, yes, but they did so with an edge of fear. But the clans of Tarkir had not forgotten the dragons of old. They had not forgotten how to fight, how to survive. The Atarka brood, like all predators, had their own sense of hierarchy, their own brutal social order. Atarka was still at the top, her flames still a beacon of death, but she was not alone in her rule. Her brood was vast, and they were hungry, very hungry. Every day the clan would bring offerings, mammoth meat and raw flesh, hoping to keep Atarka and her dragons sated. The dragons were part of the clan now, but they were also above it, an unyielding force that could never truly be tamed. But within the Atarka, dissent began to stir. A young shaman named Arul, a visionary who saw beyond the hunger and bloodlust, began to dream of a world where the dragons were not the rulers. where Tarkir could stand on its own, free from the tyranny of the Dragon Lords. It was a dangerous dream, a rebellious dream, and it sent ripples through the clan. Aryl's visions were not mere fantasies. They were warnings. A world without the dragons was a world of freedom and perhaps in some strange way peace. But that peace would come at a cost, and the cost was steep. 18 years after the Khanfall, the world had changed. The Temur, though scarred, had adapted. Yasova's band had survived, and they had thrived, but the shadow of the dragons was ever present. And then it happened. The death of two broodlings, two of Atarka's own, sent a shockwave through the Dragon Lord's empire. It was a loss Atarka could not ignore. The rage in her eyes when she confronted Yasova's band was palpable, a fury that could have turned the world to ash. Yet in that moment, when all seemed lost, Tae-jin, a member of the band, had a vision. He saw Nicol Bolas, and he spoke of the dragon who had torn through time itself, bending reality to his will. The story impressed Atarka. For a moment she paused, the rage in her eyes dimmed, and for that moment the Temur were spared. But the tension remained. The dragons were still hungry. The frontier, now a land of hunters and survivors, still teetered on the edge of destruction. And the dissension within the Atarka clan grew. The frontier's greatest warriors, those who had learned to survive in a world where strength was the only currency, now faced a new kind of battle. The battle for freedom, the battle for survival, not just against the dragons, but against the very system that had made them. And at the heart of it all stood Atarka, a force of nature, a remnant of a world that could never truly be tamed. In the end, Atarka wasn't just a dragon, she was a symbol of the ancient world, a reminder of what had been lost and what could still be gained. In the quiet moments, as the hunters hunted and the dragons fed, it was clear that the future of Tarkir was still in the balance, and Atarka, for all her power, was a part of it, a part of a world that would never be the same.